Hello and welcome to Free the Mind UK, a chat with a therapist. Tonight I've got a very, very special guest in the way of Andy Coley. He's a coach, international speaker, award-winning NLP trainer. He's also an ambassador for the Association of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. But before I bring Andy on, we're just going to play the intro video.
Not sure what therapy to choose? Free the Mind UK presents A Chat with a Therapist. Join us live for an up-close informal discussion of the various holistic therapies available, helping you make that important choice.
Here we go. Hi, Andy. Welcome.
Hey,
Thanks for joining us tonight. Fantastic. Really good to have you on. It's going to be very interesting chat, I know. And probably start with introducing yourself and giving us a bit of a backstory, because your story is quite important in all of this. It's
we just checked that before we came on live, isn't it? We've sort of about 10 years ago was the last time we sort of properly chatted, because we in a former life used to do two very different things. And so we both interestingly evolved into this kind of space of human development, really. So as you mentioned, my name's Andy Coley, and NLP is the area that I'm really interested in. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. I guess a quick summary that if somebody has an elevator pitch of what's NLP, basically I say it's all about how the mind works, how you take in and process information, how that information becomes your perspective on the world, and then how you recommunicate that perspective through your words, through your body language, through your behaviors, and then the patterns and programs that you get caught up in your life. Some of them are really empowering and others maybe not quite so empowering. So NLP for me is the kind of the study of what makes us us. I guess my little sort of short snippet on NLP.
I like it.
Yeah. And it's something that I got into myself through, I call it my kind of mid-30s epic life fail moment, basically, because in my mid-30s, which is what kind of when at the time I knew you, really, wasn't it, Dave?
It was,
I was a web developer, I was working for myself, but at the same time I had a marriage that just basically wasn't working for me. I was, unfit, I was unhealthy, I was at a point in my life where I just basically couldn't see a way forward. I recently did a TEDx in March, and I sort of share my story about having a moment in time driving on a road back to the house that kind of used to be my home, but didn't feel like my home anymore. My wife and I were, leading separate lives in separate rooms. And I kind of had that moment in time where I thought, I just don't want to be here anymore. I feel like I failed at my life. I wasn't proud of who I was and what I'd done. And, I basically found like I'd screwed it up. I'd probably swear more, but I'd screwed it up completely. And I had that sort of decision sort of driving back along this country lane about, do you know what, I could just flick my car off the road right now and nobody would miss me, nobody would care, it would be over and done with. And that felt like at the time something that, could have been a good way out. But it didn't, in fact, the thing that stopped that from happening was kind of in my mind in that instant. I actually kind of fast forwarded to what my funeral would be like and how disappointed people would be there that hadn't asked for help. And it was kind of that thought of having let everybody down that kind of stopped that from happening.
Thank God you had that thought, Andy.
Yeah. And in the same way that our mind can, trick us and show us the worst parts of ourselves, and keeps us up at night worrying, it also, is a bloody creepy resource for going, hang on a minute, just you've forgotten all the things you have achieved as well.
Absolutely.
And kind of that moment in my life, and I don't know if you want to share the screen, but this was me on the sort of the day I moved out from being with my partner. We've been married, my wife, we've been married for 11 years, but we're kind of grown apart. We really shouldn't have been together for at least 4 or 5 of those years towards the end. And this was me in my sort of mid-30s, sort of 11, 12 years ago.
Gosh.
35 years old, 23 stone in weight, moving back home to my old childhood bedroom, back in my mum, dad's house, really feeling like I had to start my whole life again.
Gosh.
And that's what I did. And I was really lucky that I had a guy that had trained in NLP that supported me and coached me. And so he helped me to look at, right, what are the things that you can do, that you can focus on, and what are the things that you can control. And because suddenly I had all this time back, I was single again and this available time. And also because of my health and my fitness, I decided to focus on health first, because family was okay, and my web development work, that's what I used to do back in the days when we were going to networking events together. The web development work was going okay. It was paying the bills. So I decided to focus on health. And one of the things that NLP really helped me to get to was like, how do I motivate myself to make changes? Like, I knew the educational side. I mean, I'd try stuff like Slimming World and Red Days and Green Days, and I'd started my way up on the train on cabbage soup diets in the week when I used to work up in London, and I'd done all the educational things, but I'd never really connected with wanting to do it, with feeling motivated for it. And there were 2 key things that really helped me. First of all, is I recognize how much I need to be in a group, to get that group to help me and to maintain me and to kind of being in a tribe. And I'm sure you find that from the people that you attract, like having people that are like-minded, that are doing the same as you, that encourage you along. When you're having a bad day, they can pick you up. And I hadn't had that in my relationship, because our relationship wasn't functional or was dysfunctional. I didn't really get that from anyone else I had in my life. So I got into this new group of people that really helped to encourage me and to help with the fitness. And the other thing was that I was trying for such a long time to go away from a problem. Now, in NLP, we talk about how people get motivated towards making changes. 2 things that motivate you towards making a change is either you're avoiding pain, so it's an away from motivation. And for such a long time, I've been trying to lose weight, and not be fat, and all these things that were very away from motivated. But I hadn't really set what my towards motivation goals were.
Indeed.
We talk about the power of goal setting, and your unconscious mind needs clear instructions and needs a goal to be able to go towards. And so when I started setting clearer instructions about fitness, starting to do running and doing a 5K race and a 10K race. And in fact, even back in 2014, I actually did a triathlon. And so this was me having...
Look at that. Look at the difference, Andy.
I know. I've deliberately made the picture slimmer as well. No, and I achieved a triathlon and so much more. I mean, in 9 months, I actually lost 6.5 stone in weight, 32 kilos.
Incredible.
Yeah, and imagine 32 bags of sugar stacked on top of one another. Like, you put those in your shopping trolley. I couldn't have lifted them, but I wore them every day. And so when I got really into making these changes for myself, that's what really got me fascinated about NLP as a methodology for helping people change their mindset. And NLP has fantastic uses. It's useful for coaching. It's useful for therapists. Now, I am not a therapist. I know this is a talk with a therapist. Yeah. I don't have a therapist background in training, but I do help and support people through coaching. And if you're a counselor or a psychotherapist, NLP is useful for that. If you're a business leader or a manager, NLP is useful for that. So NLP as a tool set is really useful to get to know you and then get to know other people. And so I started obviously focusing on health and improve that area. I switched over and learned and trained to become an NLP trainer back in 2012. And then I started to look at other areas. So relationships was an area that I really wanted to kind of get back into, if you like, and improve. And I got introduced to my wife, Sophie, now, who we got married 6 years ago. And Sophie is in a similar field. So she actually teaches hypnobirthing. So she helps couples to have really empowering births. And she also attends births as a doula as well. And not only that, I became a stepdad to a guy called Freddie, who's much older now. He's 13 years old, but I love this picture. and I moved up to Lewisham in southeast London. So I used to be on the south coast near Chichester. And so a lot of things started to evolve and change in my life, alongside running a business as an NLP trainer and going into organizations and supporting them. And then we've been very lucky enough to have our own kids. So Megan, who came along, she's now 5, just started school this year. And then we had another one, Beatrice. And to look at that person who at the age of 35, his mid-30s, was going to take his own life and thought life wasn't living.
Absolutely.
So now having the family, the dog, and everything that kind of goes with that, my life is so different now because I keep doing the work. And the problem, by the way, when you learn about this stuff, is you can't avoid doing the bloody stuff. Raising your level of emotional intelligence, and you're probably one of those people because you're watching this. So many people go through their life just reacting, but not even thinking about it afterwards. They just react, do, carry on, regardless.
Absolutely.
They're in the same patterns. They're doing the stuff that parents did. They're saying the things the parents said. They're just not even being reflective on it. They probably even notice that they're doing it.
Yeah.
But some people get to a point where they go, oh, why did I do that? Where did that come from? What was it about that? And they get a bit more reflective. And then ultimately, if you start being able to notice yourself about to do something, then again, that's just raising that level of emotional intelligence you have. Until you start doing things in advance and going, I'm choosing what I want to do and I'm choosing how to react next.
Exactly. That's the key, Andy, isn't it? I know I like the Eastern philosophies, and it's all about awareness. When you've got a sense of awareness, you then get that choice. You have that choice. And like you said before, when you haven't got that, you're in the merry-go-round of old behaviors.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, that was part of the reason as to why, I really love NLP as a tool set. But one of the reasons why I love taking it into companies, coaching people, taking it into all sorts of organizations that I work with. I work a lot in the NHS. So I do a lot of work taking NLP mindsets and tools into NHS leadership programs within GP surgeries. I was training 140 trainee doctors last week around resilience and mindset and well-being. There's all sorts of things that I work within the NHS that helps, but also commercial organisations. I've worked with, and spoken at Sainsbury's and the Co-op. I've worked with Groupon, Ubisoft, the computer games company. All sorts of companies that really get that if you invest in your own mindset, that can really help. And I keep, for me, evolving on and challenging myself. One of the biggest things that I've sort of done in terms of speaking and training was I got to do a TEDx that I did in March. So I did the sort of TEDx Lewisham event, and that was each TEDx has a theme, and that was about love and empowerment. And I spoke about the power of home for me, where home has had such an impact from, being that home that I lost, when my wife and I split up, to being the place where my dad had his final days in his home, the impact that had on the family, to the fact that our daughter Megan was born at home with just my wife and I in the bathroom. In fact, both our children were born at home. So home and the power of home and the meaning and the love that is connected with home wherever you happen to be at that moment in time. And so that, getting to do all of this work has been sort of fascinating from that point of view. And that's why for me, I really love that's the sort of the power of NLP and what it gives you to be able to shift and change your life or your thinking or your communication or your relationships or whatever you want to apply it into. For me, it's kind of like NLP is the Swiss Army knife.
I like that analogy. I like it.
That it enables us to make those changes.
Fascinating, Andy. Fascinating. Just going back to your training, I think I know somebody you used to do some training with, and you helped her. You had to jump off a cliff or something into water. Her name was Heather, and she was petrified, and you talked her into. Well, you helped her through the process. I was talking to her the other day because she knew you were coming on. She said, "I know, Andy."
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, that was on a boot camp with the guy that I did the personal development with, and we were going down to Swanage and doing some co-steering.
That's right.
And just that whole thing around throwing yourself off a perfectly good cliff into the air and then into the water. You know, for some people, it's when you do it, you get exhilarated by it, and you loved it, and you want to do it again. And why was I thinking that would be a problem?
Exactly.
And of course, whatever comes up for you in your life, whatever comes up within your body, whatever happens, be it a phobia, a fear, something that stops you, a reason why you procrastinate, your unconscious mind is trying to keep you safe. Okay, its prime directive is to make sure that you keep yourself alive.
Yeah.
But sometimes what it does is it creates situations or creates feelings within ourselves that disempower us, or that stop us, or that mean that we end up getting really scared and frightened because of the prospect of what it thinks might happen with the thing that we're about to do. And often that's where things like fears and phobias can be really interesting things to work with. You know, we're not born with any phobias. We're born with the fear of loud noises or the fear of falling. You see that in the kind of startle reflex that babies have. Everything else we learn. And again, with the philosophies of NLP, if I absolutely believe if you've learned to do something, you can unlearn it. Absolutely. You need to understand why it got created in the first place, and offer the unconscious mind a way of replacing that with something that's maybe more ecological or better for you now.
Absolutely.
So a phobia of spiders, or heights, or needles, or belly buttons, or the underground, or all sorts of things that
there's a lot of them out there, Andy.
You know, any of those things, at some point, your unconscious mind connected that stimulus, that trigger, with a response that it had. And then when it thinks of that stimulus, it gets that response straight away, and it tries to do that to keep you safe.
Absolutely, because it's got your well-being in mind. That's what its whole goal is.
And that's why people do things that are destructive for themselves. Be it their behaviors, or be it their fact that they smoke, or they drink, or they take drugs, or whatever it happens to be, because they've connected something with that thing that they're taking. And if you start to unpick those layers and get underneath what am I getting from this? You know, I do. I've done quite a lot of people. Having people stop smoking. You know, often the whole thing around feeling calmer around smoking. Well, smoking a cigarette doesn't make you feel calm. It actually does raise your heartbeat, your levels. But often what the deep breathing does is make us then feel calmer. So you can access that parasympathetic breathing just by breathing deeply, but without a cigarette. You know, but they've attached a cigarette to it. So you can't just say stop smoking because smoking is bad for you, because everybody consciously, logically can't deny that they must know that. It's written all over the packets for a start.
Absolutely.
But yet they're hooked to the feeling that they get from that trigger point. And so replace the stimulus with a different thing. I know a lot of people that are in the sort of, you know, stopping alcohol sort of space. And I work with that a little bit myself. And I stopped drinking 2 years ago and a bit myself, because I just recognized that lockdowns and young children really were not working with alcohol. One of the things that one of my friends in that space says, Janie Lee Grace, she talks about you sort of keep the you keep the celebration, but you change the ingredients. So keep doing what you're doing, but switch the alcohol for something else. And so when you start to understand what is it I'm getting from this, I don't want to stop drinking because I might miss out on my social time. I don't want to stop drinking because I don't want to feel like I'm left out. Well, switch it, change the ingredients, do something different, so you can do the same thing but with a different ingredient to it.
Absolutely.
And again, it's just fascinating about how we work with that mindset piece.
I find it fascinating, actually. I'm really interested. It's not an area I've got into at the moment with addictions and stuff, but like you say, it's just changing the stimulus. You know, it's I can't hear you, Andy.
Sorry, it's all right. I've got this end of a tickly cough, so that's why you don't hear me bark.
No, that's okay.
And NLP is a sort of fascinating field that has, you know, grown up in the 70s. There were two guys, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, slightly enthusiastically mad people in California, who kind of got together, and they were in the kind of the birthplace of all the psychology things that were going along, that were sort of coming along. They had access, within the University of California to these people to be able to start talking to and finding out about how does their thinking work. Like, how does Virginia Satir, who was a fantastic family therapist, how does she manage to get down to the crux of how, the questions that she asked really kind of get rid of all the big generalizations, the deletions that we have? How does she ask such good questions?
Yes.
How does someone like Milton Erickson do his hypnosis so well? How do other people in Fritz Perls and people in these sort of fascinating psychology areas, how do they do what they do so well? And so they created a series of models based upon the way that those people worked. And NLP is a lot about, on one hand, about models, about human understanding, and a model is just, a metaphor for the way that the brain kind of works. From that perspective, but it isn't true. We don't really know how the brain works. We that whole duality piece. We are the mind, and the mind is us, and that. Where do we start to even come in from that perspective?
Absolutely.
Just enabling people to be able to get a grip on what they might be experiencing within themselves is often a really good understanding. And a lot of my coaching might actually be educating people around some of the principles of NLP. One of the big ones that I do, for instance, with people like the doctors and is talk about this whole perception of how your interpretation is very different to my interpretation. We take in billions of bits of information at any one time, everything that's hitting your senses. So everything you're seeing or hearing right now. So as we're talking, you're looking at the camera, you've got a light ring on, there's a scrolling banner I can see at the corner of my eye. Even when I'm waving my arm, I can see that happening. I've got stuff happening outside my window. I can hear cars going past. Maybe on my mobile phone might be buzzing from time to time. There's lots of bits of information, billions of bits of information. Your big right toe still exists, and give it a wiggle. Your left little finger, that's still there. That's not gone anywhere, but our brain can't cope with all that information.
Of course.
So it deletes things, it distorts things, and it generalizes information. And so we take these billions of bits of information, we refine it down into a very small thing that we're paying attention to right now. And what we decide to pay attention to is often based on a second set of filters. Our values. If something's important to us, we'll pay attention to it.
Of course.
We get beliefs about something, whether we believe it's true or we believe that we can't do it. Again, that will define and refine the way that we pay attention to information. If something's happened to us in the past, we've made a particular decision in the past, again, that may affect the way that we see something or hear something based on previous experiences. So all of these filters create what we call in NLP your map, your internal representation. So all look at something or hear something and then have a different interpretation of that. Like if you and I went to cinema right now, Dave, and we watched the same film being beamed on the same screen at the same time. Well, first of all, depending on your hearing and my hearing, and I'm getting older, and
does say
it. depending on what that's like, immediately we will be having a different experience.
Of course,
of the screen and the film, depending on what you think of the actors, of the genre, of the cinema, of what podcast you've listened to before you've gone in. You'll have a different experience to me. Like you stick Marvel on anything, I love it. I loved it before I've even gone in the cinema. I probably listened to a podcast about it. My wife Sophie, unless it's got Thor in, I'll be honest, she's not interested. She'd rather go and see something black and white with some plot, But the film is the film.
Yes.
But what you decide and what you interpret about the film is very different to both of you. And so when you're having a conversation, immediately every word you ever say and every gesture you ever do will be interpreted differently by the person you're giving it to than what you mean by what you're saying. And it's a wonder we ever communicate at all, because we're both coming at it from our perspectives, but neither of us knows truly what the other person's perspective is. And we can't ever communicate what we really mean when we're communicating. Like, can you imagine trying to describe the most amazing, beautiful sunset or sunrise that you've ever experienced? So you went back to one. Yeah?
Yes.
The point is, even as you remember it, it will be different to how it was.
Yes.
your memory of it will be different. Every time we access a memory, we change it based
I was
upon
going to say that every time you go back to it, it changes, doesn't it?
Yeah. You could play with that memory. You could insert different things into that memory and it would change it. I'm not going to, because that sounded like it looked like it was a great one. You know, but if you were then trying to put that into words to me, I have to interpret your words and they will be different to my words. Now, I could tell you about standing on a beach in Alicante in Spain. Yeah. And behind me, there's a castle that's on a massive tall rock. You know, and to the right of me, there's a fantastic hotel, the Hotel Malaya. And on to the left, there's a sort of stretched far out beach. And the sunrise was just starting to come up over the sea. So in your mind, you're already starting to create pictures.
I am, yeah.
I said Alicante in Spain. So some of you may have been there. Others of you not. So you just probably stuck a French town, town in there. Yeah. And then talked about a castle behind me. So you've stuck some kind of castle behind me. It won't be the one I'm thinking of
course,
unless you know what that one looks like.
Yeah.
But again, you only know what it looks like from the angle you remember it. And then the beach to the left, the hotel to the right. So you are creating a landscape based on my words. But they are not going to be the same as what I'm thinking of in my head. And even when I'm thinking of it in my head, it's not the same as standing there on that beach at that moment in time, watching that sunrise.
Of course, it's going to be different, yeah.
And this is where the art of communication comes in. Is sometimes parking your stuff to one side. And this is why I love working with coaches and enabling coaches to learn more about NLP. Because if you park your stuff to one side and really start to understand and listen to the other person about what they're telling you, about their experience in their words, then that's when you start to have true connection with that person.
Of course.
And getting to understand that, of course, your map, your perspective, then has a knock-on effect to how you feel, your emotional state, that then has a knock-on effect to your physiology, what happens within your body. And all of that comes back out through your behaviors. So your behaviors are an end result of what you've seen and heard, and then how you've interpreted that through your internal neurology. And so, again, that's the fascinating thing for me about NLP as a construct and a set of tools and principles which are really useful for things like coaching, but they're really useful for understanding yourself. Because suddenly you go, crap, I have to own my stuff. Like nobody made me angry.
Exactly.
Like, nobody misinterpreted that apart from me.
Exactly.
You know? Suddenly you have to own that and put the emphasis on you and your understanding rather than the other person and their communication.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that because I've always been aware that no one can upset me. Only I can upset myself. To some extent, pretty much.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing about that whole perspective is you gotta own what's going on for you. If you're frustrated, you're frustrated. Then look at what happened just before I felt X. Frustrated, angry, annoyed, upset, sad, happy, joyful, whatever it happens to be. What was the thing that created that emotional response within me? Because I might not be consciously aware of it yet. And so therefore roll back to what happened, what was the trigger? Because basically if you can extend the time between the trigger, the stimulus, and your response, you start to really understand what's going on up here.
Yes. And
so that's where principles like journaling and free writing and you know and getting to deconstruct you, working with a coach to really step through moment by moment about what might have been happening in that moment in time. Because if rather than trying to deal with the end result, the behavior, what if you could deal with the trigger?
Exactly.
So if the trigger wasn't being pulled, you
Yeah.
wouldn't have to be dealing with the repercussions down the line.
Yeah.
And for me, that's one of the key component areas where NLP is different to something like CBT. So CBT is basically around how can you help that person resolve and improve and do something about their behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Because the behavior is the end result, by changing the behavior, you will probably, through CBT, help them in some way to change their mindset as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas NLP kind of looks at all of those aspects. It looks at the filtering, it looks at the thinking, it looks at the physiology, it looks at the behaviors as well. But really it's paying attention to what's going on up here in terms of the interpretation of the trigger point, of the input. because it's something will have happened. And what can we do about the something that happened to give it a different response or to think in a different way? And that stuff goes, well, how can I change that stuff? I just do it. But of course, you change your mind all the time. Yeah? Changing your mind, and this thing called neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to be able to shift and change and to think differently, happens all the time. Think of a piece of music you used to love, and you played it so much, or you found out something about the artist. Something got revealed, and suddenly you found out something about that person, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, I don't like that music anymore. That's it in action.
It is. You're absolutely right.
Using something like NLP allows you to do it with intention on something you would like to change consciously, so that you can work on it unconsciously.
I always say to people, you've got to be that awareness again. Become aware of that behavior. What creates it? Like you were saying, what's the trigger? It's like it's the crux of it for me, really. That
it's becoming responsible.
It is absolutely responsible.
And changing that thought process, that you start to be able to choose, what you want instead. I've got another slide up here. We just want to share the screen again, Dave.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Oh, sorry, I have to click a thing, don't I? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Don't worry.
I'll wait for you. You'll wait for me. There you go.
There we go. Oh, wow. This looks interesting.
So if you go top in the center, everything begins with a thought. Everything begins with a thought. That thought creates your feelings, that then create and dictate the actions that you take. And the more that you do an action, it becomes a habit. And those habits, for good or for bad, create the results that we end up getting in our life. And then how we end up reacting in a situation. But once you start to become aware of those thoughts, and you can choose those thoughts, you are able to choose feelings that are actually much more motivating, much more empowering. And then your actions have purpose. Your habits can become aligned with the results that you want, and you can design the results that you want proactively rather than reactively. So when you become responsible or responsible for what you're feeling, that's when actually all of a sudden, you start to be able to notice what are those reactions, and what are those principles, what are the things that are really working from that perspective. There's a little model called the Mercedes model that looks at our thinking, our feeling, and our doing. Now, and your thinking is your internal processing. Your feeling is that internal state that you end up feeling as a response to the thinking. And of course, your external behavior is how it all comes out to the outside world. So again, noticing where or what was the thinking that led to this particular feeling and therefore that response. But of course, we loop back round. So we think, feel, do. And then because we've done, we then think about what we've done, that then creates a feeling, that then creates a doing or some other kind of emotion from that perspective. So again, just noticing that becoming responsible for those feelings for what you end up thinking, or noticing your thinking, is such an important and empowering part of just getting started into finding out about how do you do you, and of course how you do you is through modeling. If the people in your life and the people who are important to you and the people in your world were doing X, guess what you're more likely to do? You're more likely to copy them. If you're raised in an environment where so-and-so was thinking like this, or they said these things, or they acted in this way, you're more likely to act and react like that. I see me and my kids, particularly when they were like learning to walk and stuff. So I've got dodgy knees, being 23 stone for a long point of your life when you're younger doesn't do well for your knees. No. So when I get up from the sofa, I tend to be a little bit like, watching your 3 or 4 year old do that, and they're saying the same thing when they get up, not for any other reason than I do it, so therefore they do it. You go,
It's
because
interesting.
they're copying, they're modeling. You know,
They're modeling. And it's surprising how many people make their noises when they get up, and there's no pain, there's no reason to make those noises.
Yeah.
So it must be like our grandparents' fault somewhere along the line. I don't know, but I find I do it myself, and I'm actually become more aware of it. So I've decided to choose not to make those noises because it's not relevant. I don't have to.
Yeah. And noticing your own biases and noticing your you know, where you are. Oh, I'm being just like my parents. Like, oh, what's that? Do you want to still do that? Do you want to choose to be different? You know, once you start giving yourself choice, you know, and that perspective, you know, then you are constantly just modifying and changing and tweaking and adjusting your brain. You know, like when we're born, imagine we're a bit like an iPhone or an Android phone, straight out of the box.
Yeah.
And we come pre-installed straight out of the box with that kind of base operating system. Yeah. But of course, then as we start to get older, well, our parents start putting apps on for us. They start determining what the background is that we've got on there. They start choosing things for us. Yeah. And as we get older and older, then we start putting our own apps on there and the apps of our friends and our mates and the ones that the teachers tell us to put on there as well. And we start to be able to then start taking our own pictures and choosing our own backgrounds. And again, as we start to get older and older, and then maybe we go, well, hang on a minute. Like, I don't want that app that I was given by my teachers. I don't believe that. And I don't think that anymore. And we start uninstalling apps as well. Yeah. And so ultimately, your phone and my phone and every phone in the entire world ever, I completely guarantee that no two phones are ever the same.
No.
They won't have the same apps. They won't have the same information. They won't have the same data. They won't have the same photos. And in the same way, no two brains are ever the same, ever. Because again, we all have slightly different lenses that we look through. We've all got different memories that we've stored. We've all got different apps that work for us or don't work for us. Yeah.
I really love that sort of metaphor. I'm going to have to pinch that, Andy, at some point in the future. That's you can
have that one for your next talk.
It doesn't surprise me that you're using that one with the apps and that from your background. But well, what a great way to explain it, because it's very much like that. Very much.
And really sort of recognizing, like, when I'm choosing what I want to do going forward, what is it I want to have happen? Like, we can spend so much of our time focusing on what we don't want rather than what we do want. The problem is your brain can't process negatives. So in order to not think about something, it has to think about it. You know, if I said, don't think about the big blue squirrel behind me. Don't think about the blue squirrel. Don't think about the blue squirrel. Don't focus on the big blue squirrel right behind me. There's no blue squirrel. Don't think about it. Big blue squirrel. Don't think about it.
I know, he's there. He's there behind me.
At some level, the brain goes, oh, blue squirrel. Don't think it. So it has to create one in order to not think about it.
Yeah.
In the same way, we tell ourselves not to worry. Don't forget. And yet our brain then has to worry in order to think about not worrying. In order to process a word, it has to think about the word and then try and get rid of it. But immediately you've told somebody to not worry. Dave, I really don't want you to worry about that thing that you were really worrying about earlier. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it. Immediately your brain's going, whoa. Whereas actually, if you start using language that's much more positive and towards and what they do want, what is it I want to happen, then actually it becomes much easier. So rather than not forgetting, I want to remember. Rather than not worrying, I want to stay positive, stay hopeful. Yeah. And so giving your brain clear directions. Because in order to not think about something, it has to think about it. And
Go on, I interrupted. Go on.
Oh, sorry.
I'm thinking it's coming into the realms of clean language. Is that what you're sort of heading towards with this?
Well, I mean, clean language is something that I've also studied and done a lot of training in as well.
Yeah.
And that question of what would you like to have happen is a very clean way of asking an outcome from that perspective. And clean is brilliant if you're a coach in order to be able to ask great questions of people and to be able to discover information in their words and from their perspective and to help explore metaphors in the best way. The reason it's called clean, by the way, is most people use very dirty language, very dirty questions. So because what they do is rather than listen literally to what somebody say. They listen inferentially.
Right.
So if I said to you, I'm thirsty, a literal listener would go, and he's thirsty. They wouldn't make a judgment about it. They wouldn't make an opinion. They wouldn't stir them into action. They would just think it's a piece of data.
You're right.
An inferential listener, so rather than a literal listener, an inferential listener would go, do you want a cup of tea? Are you okay? Yeah. If you had enough to drink today. Yeah. They would give meaning to what was said. And most of us, when we are listening to other people, create meaning about what we think is being said.
I see.
It's different to what is really being said. So part of the purpose of clean language, and clean language came from the work of a guy called David Grove, who was an amazing therapist and really good at storytelling and metaphors and really working with clients to cleanly get what it was that they needed and what they wanted. And David's work's been taken on by various sort of NLP trainers over the years that created the model and the clean language question set as we know it nowadays. Clean language about how can I ask a question of somebody, but with the least amount of inference that I possibly can when I'm asking the question. Okay, so let's take a doctor. Okay, if I went to the doctor and said, oh, I've got this really bad pain in my arm, yeah, immediately probably a doctor will try and diagnose it. Okay, oh, front of the arm, back of the arm, is it the elbow? You know, how did you bang it? What happened? Yeah, they would make up a load of questions in their head about the pain in my arm. Okay, clean language is about asking questions where you use the other person's response, yeah, the other person's information, and ask questions in a way that enables you to kind of get to the crux of what was really going on for the other person. So you might say, oh, pain in your arm. What kind of pain is that pain in your arm? And so a clean question is about taking something the other person's given you, a word, a phrase, a gesture, and then feeding that back into a question that you would ask of the other person.
Right.
I've got a few here on the screen, actually.
Okay. That'd be good. That'd be good. Let's have a look.
So, yeah, these ones here are sort of good, clean questions. So what kind of pain is that pain? They might say. Was there anything else about that pain? Are two questions. They're called developing questions. They allow you to develop what the other person's told you, but in a way that the other person controls the outcome rather than you leading them in a particular direction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what kind of pain? Oh, it's a pain right here in my elbow. Is there anything else about that pain? Well, yeah, I was doing all right, but then I banged it against the side of the car, and it's not stopped aching since. It's got a big lump that's come up. Yeah. And so probably in two or three questions, the person you're talking to is in control of the conversation and giving you the data you probably would have guessed, that you probably might have gotten, but only if you get 1,000 other questions you could have asked.
Indeed.
And so it simplifies your role as a coach. Because one, you can keep your active listening going, because you can really listen to what the person's saying. Yeah. And then you put the person in control of the reply. And all you do is draw attention to a particular element that you want to find out about.
I love that. That's really interesting. I've come across it before, but go on.
You haven't?
I have, but I haven't gone into it properly. You know, I haven't studied it as such.
Yeah, it's fantastic thing to do training in as a coach.
Yeah.
The third question is what we call a kind of like an outcome question. What we're trying to do is find the other person's outcome. And so what would you like to have happen is a great one. It allows the other person to fill in the blanks. I would often start my coaching sessions, so, thanks for getting together with me today. We're here to explore, X, Y, Z, what would you like to have happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they set their intention for what they're expecting. And it helps you then to meet that expectation.
Of course. I like that.
When I'm working with corporate clients, cool. So you've talked to me about X, Y, Z problem. What would you like to have happen? Immediately then, from a sales perspective, they're telling me the solution they want me to give them. And if I write down the solution that they want in the words that they want it, and then I make sure that when I feed the quotation back to them, I'm using their words, immediately I've built rapport. I'm giving them the solution they've asked for. They're more likely to buy from me. And then the cleanest way of asking a question is actually to paraphrase it. And paraphrasing is different to paraphrasing. So with a paraphrase, you listen to something and you kind of summarize it back.
Yes.
Of course, when you're summarizing it back, you're summarizing it in your words, not the other person's words.
Mm-hmm.
So a paraphrase question is to use the same words the person said,
Yeah.
feed it back as a question.
Yeah.
So let's take the doctor scenario again. You know, I've got a pain in my arm. I'm like, oh, pain in your arm?
Mm.
Yeah. And so by literally just saying the words back, but phrasing it as a question, pain in your arm?
Mm.
Yeah. Therefore, the person will know exactly what you're talking about because it's their words. And they're more likely to then, again, take the conversation in whichever direction they want to that's relevant for them.
Makes it a lot easier for you as a coach or as a trainer as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And for me, that's where getting to understand, coaching, is about understanding their issue and understanding what the issue really is, because your problem is never your problem. Like your problem with XYZ at work, the boss, the job, the stuff you've got to do, your partner, whatever it happens to be, that's not really the problem. Yeah, that might be the thing you're coming to me with, but the real problem might be something else going on underneath.
Of course,
it'll be an issue with your identity, with a lack of purpose, with the fact that you don't feel that you're good enough, with and the don't feel that you're good enough comes from when XYZ back in your days when you were at school told you that you were rubbish at something, and now you've held that onto yourself for the rest of your life. Yeah, that's what's showing up.
Yeah,
as part of that. But we're like layers, and we have to peel back the onion. And so, my role as a coach, when I'm coaching people one-to-one, is to help people to get underneath the surface of those layers, but not in a counseling and psychotherapy way. What I'm really want to understand is what you want to do next. Because you can't change the past. Okay, none of us can change the past. But what we can do is decide how we want to be next, and we do that now. And so for me, the power of coaching is about focusing on what's next by learning about what's been. Absolutely.
It's like when I'm with a client, I'll say, so how would you like to feel? It's a similar thing, isn't it? Pretty much.
Exactly. Yeah. As long as, to put a clean hat on, they said they want to feel differently.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that's a very dirty question. But sometimes you need to ask questions which might be a bit provocative, or which might be deliberately away from what they've told you that they might need or might want in order to get the conversation going and flowing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that you need something to start to look at. There's one other little model that I just kind of wanted to just sort of run through that is I always find such a brilliant thing to look at from the point of view of coaching. And that's around the whole process of change. And there's a guy called Robert Dilts who's been in the field of NLP for nearly 40 years now. And he was sort of back one of the first students of Banner and Grinder when they started getting together and having their sort of NLP parties and doing all their kind of mindset work. And Robert created this model called the neurological levels of change.
Okay.
So what it looks at is when we make changes in our life, or when changes are forced upon us in our life, the higher up that we make them through the levels, the more impact that they will have on us. Okay. And the more they will then ripple down through the other levels. So the first and lowest level, excuse me, is the level of environment. So that's basically where you are and who you're with.
Okay.
If you only make a change at an environmental level, okay, you're not so likely to have a lasting impact or lasting change on maybe some behaviors or some part of who you are. So for instance, have you ever moved house from one place to the next place, but that didn't really fix your problems? Yeah. Or ever changed jobs, or ever tried to working for a slightly different customer? Yeah. But actually, do you know what? They're still getting the same stuff happening again.
Yes.
Because often you've changed the environment level and not any higher. Sometimes we change our behaviors. We change what we're doing or not doing. And we make alterations to that, and that can help us within the environment level then to who we are and where we're hanging out and the people that we're mixing with. But again, just changing your behaviors often isn't enough. Sometimes we then try and learn a skill or a competency. We gain more knowledge in something. So we read a book, we go on a course, we do a thing, and we chuck some skill at it instead. And that might start to change our behaviors and what's happening within our environment. But again, it doesn't often stick yet. So when you start getting into the deeper levels, are things like, have you really altered or looked at your beliefs, your limiting beliefs or your empowering beliefs? Have you looked at those really in enough detail? Have you truly focused on what's important to you, your values? Because again, if you've got a mismatch of values or an out of alignment with the values, or some core values, I know we were talking about core values before, core transformation. If you've got some core values that aren't being met, that has a big impact. So again, doing some work around values and beliefs is really important. But ultimately, where we really start to get the changes sticking is at the levels of identity and purpose. If you are carrying with you an identity that is sticking in your life and stopping you moving forward, then that will create a situation where you don't feel like, you know, you're getting anywhere. So for instance, my label that I was really carrying with me was I'm a failure. Yeah, I failed at my marriage, I failed in my businesses to succeed, I'd failed at my life, I failed at this, I failed at that. You know, I was going to be the only person in my life, my family, that's ever going to get divorced. You're a failure. And because I was carrying that label of I'm a failure, I had beliefs supporting my failure. I had values around, you know, fail, pride, you know, not being good enough, not being enough of a man, you know, all those kind of things I was carrying with me. Societal crap that, you know, I was raised with or to think was good.
Yeah.
I was really skilled at being a failure. I had behaviors that supported me being a failure. I was hanging out in places where failures hang out, you know. So I had everything aligning with the fact that I was a failure.
Wow.
And part of it, for me at that point in time, is because I'd lost my purpose. Yeah, my purpose as in my 20s was to get married, maybe have kids and a family, to, you know, get the house, get the car, retire, you know, have a great life like my parents had had. That was my purpose. But of course, then getting into my 30s and then in my mid 30s, that purpose evaporated and disappeared. Yeah, I was no longer in a relationship, and now I'm a failure. You know, well, failures don't go anywhere; they don't have a purpose. So part of the coaching, and in particular around health, first of all, because you think we have all these different layers in each of the segments of our life. You know, family, relationships, money. You know, spirituality, personal development, like each of these ones has all of these elements associated with it. By setting a purpose, again, I want to become a healthy individual, and so therefore I am healthy, and so therefore having a set of values and beliefs around my health and what I can achieve, what I can do, learning new skills in terms of fitness and development, and doing the triathlon, you know, learning to swim and cycle and run, you know, in order to do the Portsmouth Triathlon, having a set of behaviors, going to the gym, going to the classes, being supported in an environment and a group that supported me to do that. Suddenly, because I'd set purpose to it, everything else was aligned.
Wow.
Having a relationship where you share purposes and are aligned in where you're going, maybe at different speeds and at different times, but having that purpose can be really useful. So often when I'm coaching people, particularly around, I don't know what to do in my life, I don't know what to do in my job, I'm feeling listless, I'm, you know, XYZ, I want to stop smoking, I want to do this, I don't want to do that. Yeah. Often it's a lack of purpose is one of the areas that eventually we get to from that point of view. Because if you don't share the purpose, you don't know where you're going. If your brain doesn't know where it's going, it can't support you in doing it.
Absolutely.
And so that, for me, is why this is a great model as an individual. This is a great model as a team. You know, if your team are all heading for slightly different purposes, or no purpose has been defined, or the team has an identity that doesn't support its corporate values and corporate mission statement, again, it will become dysfunctional at some point from that point of view. So as a model, I just find this really sort of fascinating from that point of view.
Love it, Andy. I love that. I'm going to look at this. Listening to you gives me the inspiration to look into NLP in a much bigger way, because it really does look at all the different areas of your life and help you move forward.
Well, it looks at the fundamentals of all areas
that
you can then apply to the different areas.
Yes.
It isn't just about personal development. It isn't just about that. And NLP over the years has had a bad reputation for being, a tool used in sales manipulation or being but we know the tool is never the tool. I can get a knife and I can create beautiful and amazing food with it, and I chop my tomatoes with it and chop my bread with it. Or I can go out and do something really horrible with it. The knife isn't the thing.
No,
it's the problem. It's the thing holding the knife.
It is. It's like
true for anything in any therapy.
You
will have that. With any modality, you will have that. So for me, one of the reasons that I champion NLP and I'm an ambassador with the ANLP, and I spend a lot of time helping with things like the NLP conference and how do we do good NLP out there in the world, is because I believe it is such a useful, adaptable tool that anybody who wants to know more about themselves or anybody that wants to work with people should really know about. So
no, definitely. So what sort of techniques do you tend to use when you're working with teams and individuals from an NLP perspective, like timeline and other different techniques? Is there any technique?
That's a massive generalization. How do you work?
It's a massive generalization.
What is it they want to have happen?
Yes, no, indeed.
I mean, that's it depends, and often, the answer to most questions is it depends. It depends on the individual. It depends on the circumstance. It depends on the group. It really depends. Just because you're a teenager doesn't mean that you can't, do X, Y, Z. Teenagers are at the time, and I live in a house with a 13-year-old, so I'm, in that stage at the moment of really seeing externally, other than my lived experience, seeing externally what that's like to be in that situation where things are changing so rapidly, not just at a physiological hormonal level, but at a societal, social level, as well.
It'll be different for them, for kids at 13 now from when we were like 13. There's a lot more things going on, I guess.
And so I can't answer that question. I couldn't answer that question if you asked me, how would I work with a group of any XYZs?
Yeah,
it really depends
on the individuals and
individuals.
Yeah.
So for me, that's where once you start to understand NLP, and there are 4 or 5 levels of NLP training that you come on. You go on an introductory course, and a workshop and find out more information about NLP. I've got one coming up end of January, by the way, for anybody interested. Just email me, andy@andycoley.com.
Well, I'm going to I'll put this on for you as well, Andy, because I've got that's your web page, isn't it, for the training? Yeah,
it is. I will make sure that on that page I put a link at some point. But I'm working with a coaching organization to run some NLP training with them. Because they've got a lot of coaches that will also want to find out about NLP. So at the end of January, I've got an introduction for NLP for coaches. And then that's going to lead on to the first level of training, which is diploma. So diploma is typically a 4-day course around the principles of NLP and mindset and kind of getting you started on that NLP journey.
Yeah. Then
you become an NLP practitioner. And the practitioner training I'm with the ANLP school of NLP, and their training is very thorough, very in-depth, very evidence and research based. And so something like a practitioner course, you're looking at usually something around about 15 days in total, including those 4 days that have already come. And then the next level after that is master practitioner. Again, for something like a master practitioner, you're looking at sort of 18 to 20 days for something like a master practitioner.
Is this sort of in a classroom environment over a period of time? Or
I mean, it's done over periods of time.
Right.
It's really important to layer learning. You can't just learn all of this in one go. You've got to learn these principles of these things and then go back and use those. Get real lived examples from your perspective with your clients, with the people that you're working with, to then be able to layer the next thing on top. And so therefore, the learn NLP in 4 days. Well, you can learn some NLP in 4 days, but I guarantee it won't make you a practitioner. You can buy a practitioner certificate on the internet for $7. I guarantee that won't make you a practitioner. It certainly won't make you one that the ANLP will take on. So, it's one of those things where people try and create shortcuts, but actually through layered learning is where the experiences come. So you need to have experiences with people with enough time to be able to do the work, so that when you're doing things like time-based techniques, like timeline that you were talking about, which is a big part of part of the diploma and part of the practitioner, you know what you're doing, you know what the principles are that you're using, rather than just saying some words. Because on the internet, and hypnotize somebody, or do a bit of timeline, or do a process.
I have done some webinars, regarding particular, focused on particular techniques, which is fine. But obviously, ideally, I'd like to go through the whole process. So all those things really make a lot more sense.
And they still work, even if you don't understand how they work.
Yes.
So when you're coaching people, you can still coach them with a technique and a tool.
Yes.
But if you really want to get into it, understanding how it works is just as important.
Yes.
From that point of view.
Yeah. No, that's where I was coming from. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. And so often having the experience of being fascinated by the tool gets you interested in the tool. So that's why I absolutely go and NLP is a doing word, right? It isn't just a load of theory. Learning comes from knowledge plus experience.
Yes.
So you learn something, you then do something, and that's learning. Then you use feedback to loop that back round. So depending on what happened when you're learning, you loop that back round, because that now becomes your knowledge, and then you have more experience in, and you keep getting better at it.
Yeah.
And that's happening for all of us. I've trained nearly 250 people to become NLP practitioners over the years, and every time I'm running a course, I'm on it myself.
Yeah, of course.
I'm doing the course whilst I'm teaching the course.
Yes.
And
you're reminding yourself constantly.
Exactly. When I'm coaching people about their problem in their life that actually I have in my life as well, it's really useful for me to be able to think, oh, how might I be doing that at the same time? When this stuff happens.
Very reflective. Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. So whatever you do, and however you get fascinated, just get fascinated about the field of personal and human development, and just think about it. There's loads of stuff out there that, very accessible ways of looking at NLP. Some brilliant books. I'd really recommend some books like NLP at Work by an amazing woman called Sue Knight. That's on Audible and all good bookshops and the bad ones. So NLP at Work. That's a really good book. But even things like the Chimp Paradox and any of those kind of books that were phenomenons. A lot of those sitting at the core principles of all of those things is NLP from the point of view of metaphor work or the mindset work. But sometimes it's just not labeled as an NLP principle or a process. And of course, NLP is just modeled from something in psychology and sociology and so on and so forth. So again, none of this stuff is new, but trying to make it accessible and doable and easy to get in bite-sized chunks means that people are more likely to do it.
Yeah, I also found that for something that is to make things easy, some of the language within it was quite complicated.
That's the problem when you get a computer programmer and a mathematician and a psychologist together to create models, is they like to create things, acronyms, and
yes
you don't need to know what the acronyms are or what the names are or what a transderivational search is in order to do the process. You just do the
I
process.
think it can overwhelm some people though, when they say it, they're like, oh my god, it's like learning a new language, and
it is, it's the language of us.
I love it. Wow.
And one of the definitions of NLP is the art and science of communication. And I love that one. It really is noticing what is, how can I communicate better with somebody? And also how can I do that in an artful and an interesting way? Another definition is it's the subjective experience. Sorry, it's the study of subjective experience. What makes us us. So again, it's just fascinating about the different ways that we can just understand how we tick. And for me, NLP is a good gateway into that. And that's certainly the avenue that I've gone down and that I use all the time in so many different ways.
Yeah, I'm sure it serves you in many, many different ways. Definitely. So with regarding to there may be people watching who've got business and they've got a team, and you know, they've been inspired by what you've been talking about, and maybe want to chat with you, get hold of you, so they can just go to your website.
Yep. Go to the website. Top of the website, there's a banner for a discovery call. If you want to chat to me about coaching or training or anything, or when's your course coming up, pop something in the contact form, or drop me an email, or if you want to book a free 30-minute, you know, one-to-one chat about anything that's happening, you know, for you or within the company, just do that by going to the website, and that will pop you through to me. You won't get added to a mailing list because, you know, my company's just me. I don't have time for doing all of those things. You're not going to get added to a spam list. But if you do want to chat and you do want to reach out, you have to take action and do it. Nobody's going to do it for you. So if you got fascinated by this and you want to do something next, you've got to do something and take massive action, as Tony Robbins would say. And Tony Robbins, by the way, was an NLP trainer once upon a time, as was Darren Brown. You know,
really, Darren Brown as well.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a really good interview with Jimmy Carr recently where he talks about how NLP really supported him. Russell Brand, he's done NLP. That was part of some of the stuff that really helped him during some of his darkest time.
I bet it was
working with an NLP practitioner. So there's a lot of NLP out there. We just don't necessarily know where it is. So I'm quite surprised as well. Russell Brand. I mean, he's a great communicator. Yeah,
I do like him actually. He's a very interesting guy.
Yeah.
Wow, Mandy, it's fascinating subject, and you could talk about it for hours. Obviously,
I'm aware of the time now, so
yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. I know people are going to find this fascinating. We've had a few people watching. There's going to be lots of people watching the recording. It's going to be well worth watching. I've learned a lot. Tonight, Andy. It's
great to sort of have this time to reunion and catch up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if anybody that's going to be watching the recording, they can get hold of Andy on the website on the screen there. Just give him a call, take some action.
You'll find me on all the social feeds as well, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn in particular. If you want to reach out on any of those, just get hold of me and let's chat.
Fantastic. Well, look, Andy, thanks for coming on tonight. It's been amazing. I've really enjoyed it. I'm speechless.
In a good way, I hope.
No, in a good way. And once again, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. I don't know, people are going to benefit from this, definitely, because you covered a lot of interesting areas and points. And really good. And well done.
And of course, none of what I said is true. It's just true for me.
Yeah.
So make it true for you as well.
Your truth. So once again, thanks, Andy. And no doubt, well, I'll see you at some point, or connect with you at some point.
Definitely.
Thanks for coming on.
No problem at all. Great to see you again.
Thanks everybody for watching, and hope you enjoy it.